give everyone a moment to join from the waiting room. Okay.
Like watching a temperature, the heat increase or something. It's like, oh.
Okay.
And we do ask people to kind of post their questions on, and I kind of try to keep track of that so that we'll
Right.
have those afterwards. And we ask people on the chat to put their names and agency and city that they're
Yeah,
in.
that I was actually going to
So,
say that's kind of
yeah, we
that's
do
very
that.
nice to see.
So,
So
yeah.
yeah,
And you get some good chat stuff going on in this. So,
good.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining NAPSA SCAM Forum. I am Esther Thorpe, the Administrative Project Coordinator with NAPSA. We're so happy to have you on today's call. For those of you who are not aware, NAPSA, or the National Adult Protective Services Association, is a nonprofit membership organization that exists to provide training, advocacy, and networking opportunities for APS workers, allied professionals, victims of abuse, and anyone interested in preventing and raising awareness of elder and adult abuse. Please visit our website, napsa-now.org, to learn more about us and become a member. The forum we're here for today is organized by Debbie Deem, a retired victim specialist for the FBI, and Steve Baker, who is retired from the FTC and the Better Business Bureau. Today we have guest speaker Duke Han with us. And just a friendly reminder, membership with NAPSA is encouraged, but it's not required to be part of this group and attend these forums. Everyone's been muted, and we do encourage you to ask questions in the chat box. And then afterwards, we will unmute everyone. So yeah, and another reminder, today's call will be recorded and posted on the NAPSA website. We will also share the slides as well. All right, well, I will hand it off to Debbie and Steve.
Dave, you want to go ahead? Go quick.
Sure. Just one kind of update thing I'd like to mention that I'm really noticing is going on. And so this is it's out of India. So you guys have probably heard before about people who get calls purporting to be the FBI. They may say, gee, we found a car rented using your social security number in El Paso, Texas, and the car was full of meth and blood, and you're going to be arrested and your assets are going to be frozen. We want you to work with us on this. People say, of course, I've never been to El Paso, don't know anything about this. You must be a victim of identity theft. Okay, well, your assets are going to be frozen by the federal government, so you need to withdraw them and give us to us at the U.S. Treasury. We'll protect them, and we will come back in a few days and with Treasury checks to give you your money back. Um, that is happening all over the world. I think that people in India are referring to this as a digital arrest fraud. It is clearly the same people that are doing tech support frauds. So people that have been victims of tech support frauds are often get these calls, and so there is no such thing as anybody from the government who's going to collect your money and keep it safe. You're not subject to a criminal investigation. These are totally imposters. And I just want to, we've said this before, but that's an important message to try to get out. So I'll just limit that today. We do the Baker fraud report. A lot of you have signed up. If you're interested, just send. I'll put an email address in the chat. It comes out every Thursday. So came out this morning. That's it. And Debbie, we're glad to have you. Thank you so much.
Yes. And I'll do just a brief. This man's resume could fill out 6 pages, I'm sure, easily. This is Dr. Duke Han, and he's a board-certified clinical neuropsychologist and tenured professor of psychology, family medicine, neurology, and gerontology at the University of Southern California. His research focuses on cognition and decision-making in aging, with attention to factors that increase vulnerability to financial exploitation and dementia-related risk. I'm going to let him go ahead and talk about the rest, but you guys, we are so honored to have probably the most esteemed Alzheimer's and cognitive researcher in this field, and I'm honored to have known him for a few years and asked him a few years ago if he would do this with NAPSA, and today was the day that he's honoring that request. So thank you, Dr. Hahn, and go ahead and start.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. And for everyone on the call, please feel free to call me Duke. And I just need to say, Debbie and Steve, I'm a huge fan of both of your work and everything that you do on behalf of older adults. And I have to say also to everyone involved in APS services, thank you for all of your frontline work. It can't be acknowledged enough, honestly, all of the good that you're doing to try to protect older adults. And so I'm very privileged to be here and to share a little bit about our research, trying to understand financial vulnerability in older age. And so, as Debbie mentioned, I am a board certified neuropsychologist. And what that means is that I am clinically trained to give tests of cognition to help diagnose something like dementia or Alzheimer's disease. And one of the really the reason why I started studying this topic was because I started seeing patients that were referred to me where it was discovered by family members or APS services that they were giving away, older adults were giving away large sums of money to bogus charities or bad actors. And everyone presumed this was early dementia. And so they would refer the older adult to me to get tested. And time again, I would give hours of testing and they would test cognitively normal. So there was a clear change in behavior. This was not normal for the older adult. They started making different decisions or poor decisions, but our tests, our cognitive tests, were not picking up on that. And that really started this whole line of research trying to understand why certain older adults make poor financial decisions and might be more susceptible to scam or fraud. Mostly from a neuroimaging, neuropsychology perspective, but really, you'll see in a minute, our work has broadened from that. So, in terms of background, I might be preaching to the choir here, but older adults hold over a third of the nation's wealth. This is based on economists' projections. And we know, unfortunately, older adults lose a lot of money to scam and fraud. And you all know, I think, in some ways, the best at how devastating this can be. So the FTC put out a report just recently, just last month, actually, documenting this, really pointing out the fact that this is an increasingly severe issue that has huge ramifications for the economy and for people's individual well-being. AARP actually suggested that this could be about $28 billion annually, and this figure actually ranges in terms of the overall total effect. But the point being, it's really devastating. And so we know that some older adults might make poor decisions because some older adults might experience more than normal brain changes that occur with age. And so as we grow older, these are the brain regions in yellow that seem to decline. And we know that as brain declines, so does our thinking abilities, so do our cognitive abilities. One point I'd like to say here, though, is that so we're really talking about a portion of older adults. It's not all older adults. One of the errors I would say that I see in the field is that people automatically assume as we grow older, we're going to make poor decisions. We're going to have declining cognition, and that's simply not the case. So. Really, the prevalence of Alzheimer's disease by age is about 35%. It increases with age, but it's about 35% for those 85 and over. So there's a lot more older adults that don't develop Alzheimer's disease. And then for mild cognitive impairment, you can see here the percentages really don't get anywhere near even half. So really, we're talking about a portion of older adults. And I've started saying this in my talks because I think there's just this assumption that as we grow older, we're going to have cognitive impairment, we're going to develop Alzheimer's disease, and that's simply not the case. That being said, there are some older adults who do develop dementia and Alzheimer's disease. This is a New York Times article that suggested the way that we handle finances might be one of the first ways, one of the first signs of impending Alzheimer's disease. And I'm fast forwarding here because there's been a lot of work on this actual topic of how financial decision making might relate to Alzheimer's disease. And I think one of the most important papers here, which we were not involved in, I wish I was, but this is over 50,000 people were studied, and it was discovered that older adults who were later diagnosed with dementia, ended up starting to make poor decisions financially, and started to have things like subprime credit scores about 6 years prior to diagnosis, actually. So that was sort of the authors here were saying that this really financial decision making might be one of the earliest signs of dementia. We have done some studies in this on this topic. So, for example, we studied older adults who had mild cognitive impairment who were not demented as of yet, and we did see that older adults with mild cognitive impairment did show poor decisions when it came to financial and health matters. And then we followed this up with another study looking at three different locations. The first study was done in the Chicago area. This study actually took advantage of a multi-site clinical trial. So it actually had adults from Indianapolis, Indiana, Denver, Colorado, San Diego, California. And we saw this in all three locations that older adults who were showing mild cognitive impairment were making poor everyday decisions. However, I started off my talk saying that I had these patients that I would see in my clinic time and time again that seemed to be making poor decisions all of a sudden, but had no cognitive impairment. And so we wanted to study this. And in a group of over 600 older adults who did not have dementia at the time, we found that people did have differences in their decision-making ability relative to their cognitive ability. And so this helped explain the patients I was seeing. So it does seem to be the case that people can have changes in their decision-making even ahead of or separate from their cognitive ability, their basic cognitive abilities. But the question comes, how can we understand this? How does this happen? One of the ways that we've used to try to understand this is brain imaging. And so we know that we can see changes in the brain using brain imaging ahead of any noticeable cognitive changes. And so, just to jump forward a bit, what we think or what we hope to see essentially to help us try to understand this is that we're seeing brain changes that are happening that could explain why certain older adults are making poor decisions, but that could also happen ahead of any noticeable memory or cognitive impairment. So for this point, I did want to touch on another important topic to understand. So, when we talk about cognitive decline in the context of aging, most people just look at a solid or just see a single line that goes down. But this is the actual truth of what they're looking at, actually. That single line is average, and it doesn't really indicate all the variability that happens. And so this is a really great figure because it shows 100 random people and their cognition over time until death. Actually, the 0 point is death. Actually, these are older adults that are followed until death. And you can see that cognition goes up, goes down. It's not very clear, actually. There's not that like single clear decline that most people talk about. And so there's a lot of variability in cognition in age. And so what the authors of this study, which was brilliant, did was they took this a step further and they said, okay, what if we account for what we know happens wrong in aging? So this is not age. These are what we call neuropathology, when things go wrong in the context of aging. And so what do I mean by that? I mean, if someone developed microvascular changes, little mini strokes, if someone developed some of the underlying biology of Alzheimer's disease, people can develop that over time and have that not impact their life for a long time. So what if you statistically remove those bad things that happen in the context? It usually happens in older age, but it's not age. It's separate. It's when something goes wrong in the context of aging. What happens to the cognition line? And this is actually what it looks like. It's flat. And so basically, the idea here is that it's not age that actually causes a decline in cognition. It's really when things go wrong in the context of aging. So these neuropathological markers or these things that happen in the context of aging. So late life cognitive loss mainly reflects non-normative, so not normal pathologic and mortality related processes. Rather than normative age-related processes. And I think, again, this is an important point to say it's not age. It's not age that's going to cause us all to sort of decline. It's when things go wrong in the context of age. And so we know that age-associated Alzheimer's neuropathology impacts very specific brain regions. And these brain regions actually are involved in decision-making. And so it could be that certain older adults that are making poor financial decisions they're having their brains impacted by this age-associated neuropathology ahead of any noticeable memory decline. And so there's a lot of separate studies that have sort of pieced this together, or at least we've tried to make these connections. And so this is our current working model. So what we think is that in certain older adults, some older adults who are at risk for Alzheimer's disease actually have their brains being impacted by the neuropathology, and that's causing the change in decision making ahead of any noticeable memory problems. And so we've been using neuroimaging to try to study this, and we've published a number of studies, but I'm just going to show one just to try to drive this point home. This study is a gray matter study of a susceptibility to scam scale. And the susceptibility to scam scale was developed based on work from AARP and the FINRA organization, where they interviewed older adults who had been the victims of scam or fraud. And what the scale pulled together were characteristics of older adults that have been the victims of scam or fraud. And so you can see from the first item, I answer the phone whenever it rings, even if I do not know who is calling. You can imagine if an older adult is picking up the phone every time it rings and even not paying attention to who's calling, that they're going to be more susceptible to scam or fraud. And so what we found in a group of non-demented older adults who were not showing major cognitive impairment yet. So these are normal older adults that the ones that were higher on the susceptibility to scams measure had less gray matter density in their hippocampus. And the hippocampus is commonly known to be one of the first brain regions impacted in Alzheimer's disease. And so what the brain imaging is helping us see is that it's helping explain why certain older adults are making poor financial decisions ahead of any noticeable cognitive problems or memory problems. It could be that they're having brain changes that are consistent with an eventual dementia, but it just hasn't sort of hit that severely yet. And so a lot of this work, and this is a follow-up study where we looked at brain connections, and we found basically the same thing, that the connections in the brain seem to be related to susceptibility to scams. And again, these are in non-demented older adults without significant cognitive impairment. So basically, I need to acknowledge there's a lot of limitations to this work. These are not diverse samples. We don't know. We need to see this in more diverse samples to see how prevalent it is. So I always like to sort of throw in this caveat that we really need to replicate these findings in different samples before we can really have confidence in them. But what I just showed you were some of the first studies ever on this topic. Some of the first studies ever of brain imaging of older adults who are making poor decisions and having that be related to brain regions that are impacted or implicated in Alzheimer's disease. Now, as I was doing this work, I was very not impressed with the racial diversity of the samples actually that were being studied. And I truly I didn't know why. We know that there are racial differences in cognitive and affective factors. Racial differences in decision making are suggested. We don't know though. We don't know much about what this looks like in different racial ethnic groups. We also know that contextual factors, so things like the ability to develop literacy or socioeconomic status, might explain a significant portion of any racial differences observed due to historically documented unequal access to supportive resources. So this is something that we wanted to take a closer look at. So I worked with and have been working with Dr. Lisa Barnes, who is an amazing Alzheimer's and aging researcher based out of Chicago, and she has been studying this in over her career. We really wanted to look and see what the contextual factors are that might explain any race-based differences in decision making. And so this is one of the first studies that we published. In the study, we found that literacy actually does fully mediate any racial differences or the racial differences in total decision making. And so the essentially, depending on where you grow up, your personal history, personal situation, if you had the ability to develop financial literacy, that helps explain a lot of your decision-making ability. And we know that certain racial ethnic groups have not had that ability, and so that explains a lot of the variance in decision-making that we're seeing. So this study was was really important to me. So doing this work now, I found myself in a number of circles, and it's generally known that older adults in minoritized communities are actually experience more scam and fraud. That's a general known fact. What some people have done, though, is they've taken it a step further and have said and believe that older minoritized adults are more susceptible to scammer fraud because they experience more scammer fraud. And I never really understood why people took that extra step, actually. And so, frankly, I never believed it. So, but we have data now because we've been doing this in more diverse samples, and so we wanted to look at this because we have a measure of susceptibility to scams. And if anything, older Black adults are less susceptible to scams than older white adults, controlling for a number of different factors, actually. So it's not that older minoritized adults are more susceptible to scam or fraud. We argue that they're just being targeted more, actually, and that's why there's more scam and fraud in older minoritized communities. So basically, doing this work for a number of years now, we started realizing we need to really think a bit more broadly. A lot of the work that we've been doing had been focusing on the brain and brain changes and cognition. And actually, this was this paper I wrote with Mark Lax, who's the head of geriatrics at Cornell University in New York City. Um, Came about from a conversation that he and I, the first time he and I had ever met, we had a conversation and we ended up talking for, I think, 2 hours straight. He's a geriatrician. He started seeing patients that were being referred for poor decision making, but seemingly intact cognition. I'm a neuropsychologist in a different part of the country, and I was seeing the same thing. And we just sort of bonded on the fact that we were seeing this sort of phenomenon happening, and no one was really talking about it. And so we developed this term, age-associated financial vulnerability, which is basically this idea that certain older adults may be more financially vulnerable for a number of reasons. And so some of these reasons could be cognitive or emotional factors. We've been talking a lot about cognition up until this point, but they could also be because of medical or functional impairments. If someone's dealing with a chronic medical condition, they're a lot, and that could actually lead to more financial vulnerability. So psychosocial factors, so depression, social isolation, loneliness, and then just environmental societal factors. So we know that older adults have more money, and so they're being targeted more. And rich people are targeted, or people with means are being targeted. So we really wanted to study all of these different factors, or as many different factors as we can. And so since I've been at USC, we've been trying to take a more broader, holistic view of all the different factors that might make a particular older adult at risk. I've been talking a lot about brain changes and brain factors, but you can have an older adult that has no brain changes at all and could be the victim of scammer fraud because of a really bad actor or the environment or the context that they're in. So there's really we really wanted to understand all of these different factors. And so we have this ongoing study where we follow people, we check in with people once a year. And these are just some of the results from that study so far. So one is that older adults who are experiencing more physical or mental health issues actually experience more financial exploitation. So this is actually evidence now, data that we have that supporting what we always thought. We know that older adults who are more physically frail actually experience more financial exploitation. And this is the work of my current lab manager, former postdoctoral fellow, Dr. Axelrod. We also don't know what we don't know, I guess. And that's sort of a funny way of saying we need to know more. And so as part of the study, we have interviews that we're doing just to learn about people's experiences being financially exploited. And this is being head up by a qualitative researcher, Annie Nguyen, and we've developed sort of an interview of approach to try to learn what we don't know, if that makes sense, so that we can then study it. And so some preliminary results from just the interviews were published, and this was selected as the journal's editor's choice. And it just shows that there's just so little we know about this phenomenon. We know also from the work of one of my fellows, Dr. Aaron Lim, that interpersonal relationships are really important. And in fact, if the quality of interpersonal relationships declines, there is an increase of financial vulnerability that happens 2 weeks and even 24 weeks. This is sort of like something that you can see even in the long run, actually. This is a study that we did during COVID because everything shut down during COVID. We couldn't see people face to face, but we were able to check in over telephone, actually. And so this is something that we saw longitudinally, meaning there was definitely an effect over time. We're still doing brain imaging at USC, and one of the nice things is that we are seeing similar results, actually consistent with what we saw in our Chicago-based cohort. And then one of the studies that came out that got a lot of press was this one. We found that older adults who gave away more money to a random stranger online, and we actually do this in our study where we set up a scenario and we tell people, there's a random person online. You're getting a sum of money. How much of that money do you want to give to that random person online? I thought no one would give anything. I remember getting into arguments with the economist who's pictured in the picture below, Dr. Anya Samek. I thought no one's going to give any of that money to that random person online. But lo and behold, in our group of older adults, there was a range. And the people that actually gave more money away, this happened in a stepwise fashion, actually performed worse on cognitive measures that we know are sensitive to Alzheimer's disease. Now, it's not in the impaired range, but they performed worse, actually. So it's, again, more support for this idea that if someone starts making poor financial decisions, it could be an early sign of dementia. And so CNN did a recent feature on one of our studies that came out last year. And so I just wanted to play this and see, and I'll pick it up after this.
Researchers at the University of Southern California believe there may be a new way to spot Alzheimer's disease in its early stages.
Brain regions that are affected early in Alzheimer's disease are also involved in financial decision making.
Before she died, Jim Clunder's mom, Joan, was showing signs of Alzheimer's, but her decision-making skills around money fell apart years earlier at a huge cost to the family.
If you wanted to estimate how much she was scammed out of her own pocket, my guess would be close to $100,000.
Researchers say they may have found a link between money matters and Alzheimer's. The part of the brain called the entorhinal cortex is a relay station between the hippocampus, which draws on experiences, and the medial prefrontal cortex, which values judgment and decision-making. The entorhinal cortex was thinner in individuals who were more likely to be victims of financial exploitation.
The entorhinal cortex is also the brain region that is affected very early by Alzheimer's disease pathology.
This is something that helps explain why certain older adults may test cognitively normal, but may be showing poor financial decisions. And if this is happening, then I would encourage people to pursue resources on behalf of the welfare of the older adult.
Clunder said his mother had once worked with...
Okay, and for the sake of time, I'm just going to move on. But if you want to see the segment that's on CNN, I have a current grad student who actually did a great study showing that, and I'm just going to boil down the results here. She showed here that it's not how many social connections someone has that could be protective for an older adult. It's actually how deep of a relationship they have with even just a few people. That seems to be the most protective when it comes to financial vulnerability in older adults. And then this is brand new, literally just accepted for publication, I believe last week. So you are getting something new that no one else has seen, and I'm presenting this to you. This is Melanie Leguizamon, who's a new graduate student in my lab. And what she found is that older adults, the more that they were able to cognitively reappraise. So, and what that means is the more that they were able to sort of rethink a situation in a different way, that the less financially vulnerable those older adults were. And so why this is important is because if this could inform intervention strategies for older adults, if we can develop ways and to help older adults sort of practice how to think about a situation differently, or reappraise a situation differently, this could actually help protect older adults. Laura Mosqueda is actually one of my collaborators here at USC. She's an elder abuse researcher. I think she's known to at least some of you. Working with her has been great because it's really broadened my perspective. So we have been focused on the vulnerabilities of older adults, but we really need to understand the trusted other involved and the contextual factors involved as well. And so I'm going to skip the main points here and just go to my final thoughts. One is that vulnerability is a spectrum. One that's clear to us, at least, as we study this. And then the final thing, which is relates to the last slide with Laura Mosqueda, we're really trying to understand how all of these risk factors intersect. But not only that, what the role of the perpetrators are and the context, actually. We're trying to take a broader view of all of this to really try to understand why certain older adults become victims of scam or fraud, and in particular, what we can do to try to address that issue moving forward. So I have a lot of people I need to acknowledge that are involved in this work, and first and foremost, my lab, without which none of this would be possible. So with that, I am done and happy to take any questions.
Before we start that, I'd like to go through the handout that we have real quickly. And again, just make mention, we cannot send the slides and all that to individual emails, but those materials will be available on the NAPSA website with all our past forums that we have done. So please look there, the video, the summary of the research papers, which I'm going to talk to you about real quickly now. All of this will be included on that site. So please be aware of that. Just real quickly, I'd like to go through our scam forum advice. Esther, if you could post that again in case somebody else is new. We put this out every month and it's available. My first page is always the same for the most part. I also want to encourage you to sign up for Steve Baker's BakerFraudReport.com. It's a weekly kind of anthology or everything you might want to know about transnational frauds, trends that are going on, research, recent arrests, new kinds of crimes. Very, very good site. Also want to promote the National Elder Fraud Hotline that's run by the U.S. Department of Justice. They take calls for anybody age 60 and over. They have a language line. They will help people, from what I understand, and maybe we need to have them back, fill out IC3 and FTC complaints. So very, very good. I also list different reporting agencies as far as the federal reporting of where to go and what to do on those, including some FBI guidance for cryptocurrency fraud, what should go in a report. I included some of the consumer law people because we get many requests for where do I get an attorney to handle some of this, as well as elder law attorneys that can help with probate, estate issues, maybe conservatorships, some of those things that you may be running into. And I've also included the recent IRS advice on taxing stolen money, so that you have that information. And then on the second page, we go totally into, and I really want to thank Duke. He provided just a sampling that you guys can get of the major articles that he just went over, so you can read the actual research articles about it. He also included a podcast I think that was very interesting for me to listen to on that. And that was, speaking of psychology, financial scams, why some older adults are at risk. That's Not Her was another study by CNN. You have that copy of that video, will be on there, and some good stuff on there. I also found an Alzheimer's Association article, Resources for Families and Helpers. So different things, How to Keep a Loved One with Cognitive Decline by AARP. It was a great article that you could share with families to help them understand what these folks are going through. So all of that is included on there. The last page, as always, I try to include resources as far as some of the support groups and national support groups that are available for both victims as well as their loved ones. So please take a look at that, to take a look at what's offered there, as well as the good work by Kathy Wilson, who offers free videos, as well as some paid for trainings that you can take on this issue. So please take a look at that, and that will be really helpful for you. So, okay, Dr. Hahn, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's start with questions. I think the first question, and I'm not sure, I think Cheryl, you had the first question that I saw. What does problems in aging mean? Was that, want to go ahead and maybe talk about that? If that's still an issue for you? No? Okay. The next one, Hillary Dolan. You had the question about defining.
Debbie, hold on, because there's so many people. I'm trying to go through everyone. But I will give access to Cheryl right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're good. Okay. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay. Cheryl, are you on? Hillary, I mean, or Cheryl or Hillary. Hillary could be also on. I don't know that Cheryl still had the question. Hillary, did you still have your question?
Yeah, I just gave her access.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, it's Hillary. Hi, Dr. Hahn. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Being a rights-based attorney, I think you know where my question is going to come from. My first question was basically, what do you mean when you say poor decision-making? Do you have a definition of that? Because I'm asking because, not as a lawyer, but just because all of us make bad decisions from time to time. And so what is meant by poor decision-making in the sense that you've been doing your studies on? And my second question is, what are the implications of that? And how do we make sure that we're not, quote unquote, protecting older people from themselves by removing or diminishing their own agency over their lives based on brain scans? And not, as you had said before, a lot of this shows up before there's any impact on day-to-day lives. For example, would it be fair to say such a person might want to execute a power of attorney at this point? But you know, on the farther extreme of that, would we say that someone should have their rights to make decisions taken away before there's any implications for day-to-day life? I think you see where I'm going. I know there's some legal aid lawyers and some legal assistance developers on this call, and I'm glad they're here. But I think that there's a balance here, and I'd just love to hear your perspective on all that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. So for what it's worth, in our lab, we always want the older adult to maintain as much rights and privileges in every situation possible. So that's a starting point for us. And I think in any way that our work might be used to go against that, unless there's incredibly good reason for that, that's not something we want, actually. And we usually make that point up front. So that's our general bias coming into the situation. And what we mean by poor decision making is that we have a number of measures that actually test different aspects of decision making, which comes from the decision science background. A lot of that is informed by behavioral economics and by cognitive psychology. And so there are different forms of decision making. There's different aspects of decision making. So decision making as a just blanket term is in some ways hard to actually work with, because I think a lot of people bring their assumptions to what we mean by that. Our studies actually make clear what we mean by that with each measure. And so we have a measure of financial vulnerability, which is less a decision-making measure, but it's really just is an older adult indicating vulnerability in their finances in some way. We have a measure of decision making where older adults have to decide between what's the best financial outcome of different choices, actually. And there are some choices that are better than others. And so on the susceptibility to scams scale, we actually show there's a range of performance. So there's no cutoff for any of these. It's really just, are they high or are they low on these scales? And then we can infer based on the trend of the scores, like how that trend maps onto things like brain imaging. So do I think brain imaging should be used to take an adult's rights away? I do not at this point. We're far from that sort of notion. Do I think brain imaging can help understand why a certain older adult might make poor decisions? I think that's increasingly becoming more clear, or at least there's more support for that. So yeah, I'm trying to think of the other aspects to what you asked. A lot of what I talked about, there's a lot of subtleties and nuances and specifics that for the sake of time, I couldn't go into. So, but in a longer talk, I would go into these. And so hopefully that is a helpful answer.
So if we,
Yes, thank you very much.
if we see somebody that's repeatedly fallen for some scams and has sent a lot of money over a period of time, despite efforts to deal with them, is that a situation where you would recommend they go in for some sort of cognitive test?
Yeah, so and we actually, that's something that we do suggest, is that if someone's showing a change in behavior, now if this is a lifelong pattern, that's different. But if it's a change in behavior that's happening, we do recommend that someone, at least because of the potential tie to something like Alzheimer's disease, we do recommend that someone go see their doctor to get tests for that. And it could be tests of cognition, it could be brain imaging. There's now blood tests for dementia. And so basically, there's a lot that could be done to try to figure out if there might be an early dementia process. For years, we didn't have anything that we could do if that was the case. But just within the last couple of years, and this is a whole other topic, but there are brand new medications that actually address the pathology that causes Alzheimer's disease. So the idea now is that if you can identify if someone has Alzheimer's disease or the disease process earlier, you can intervene earlier with these medications and potentially delay or prevent the dementia process from happening any further. So there's an actual health reason to try to get identified earlier. There's some debate about this topic even, and I'm happy to talk to you about that. But and there's different thoughts about this, but yeah, we do generally recommend that. That's something I would recommend just from a health perspective. So
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So I've got several people have been keeping track of their names and questions, but we have 15 minutes, so I'm going to kind of focus on some of them and see what we get through. Those of you, I will try to get everybody. But Marianne Louis, I think your question was one that's going to apply to a lot of the people in the field. So do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for such an amazing line of research and sharing, all of the information. Would you please provide suggestions for, frontline workers and also, family caregivers like myself on how to prevent and intervene the losses of financial resources of, in my example, my aging parents, especially, when we do go to hospitals, we do MRI, we do cognitive assessments, but, especially with the cognitive assessments, they do not seem to be sensitive. And my own parents would tell me, not until I fail my test. Do not intervene with
Yeah.
So,
in your particular situation, I don't know if much can be done other than just meetings with an older adult if there are concerns, actually. So what we've started doing is actually recommending people have these conversations before there are problems, that before there are issues, and then developing a plan for if and when this happens. And then if that plan then becomes relevant at a future point, then there's sort of an agreed sort of approach that was previously agreed to. For someone in the thick of it like you, I sympathize because it's very difficult. I think, and again, our premise is that we don't take away rights from any older adult, if at all possible. So we want older adults to make decisions for their own lives, and if it makes sense, then they should have that autonomy. If there are concerns, there are. I pretty much suggest that people have ongoing conversations about things. Inevitably, what happens is that if there is something that's tied to a disease progress, like dementia, the problems reoccur. And so if there's an initial conversation, then that initial conversation can come back. You can come back to that when this happens again. And this is something that could actually essentially build a case over time with your loved one. Now, if I think Hillary pointed out, we all can make poor decisions at any given moment, right? Like it may not be, brain pathology. It could be just situational, bad day. If it's a one-time thing, then it's a one-time thing, and then and it doesn't happen again, right? And so you might have had the conversation, and then it's never an issue again, and then that's great. But in general, I would recommend engaging and as empathetically, as respectfully as possible, and having this be sort of a mutually, ideally, it becomes a mutual like end to or agreed upon next step, whether that be power of attorney. There's lots of financial devices. By devices, I mean like programs now where people can have shared sort of things. So there's multiple different levels of potential collaboration, I'll say, when it comes to this. So it's not an easy answer. I wish I had a better one than that, but that's for those of us that are going through it, that's as best as I can think of at this point. So yeah.
Thank you for that. And I think many would agree that, that's what we have to do. But unfortunately, if you're APS and some of the others doing victim services and other kinds of things, we are stuck in the middle of it where, it's already happened and what do we do now? But
yeah.
I think there was an interesting question, Paula Castro, dealing with AI. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question? I think this will be an interesting one for the group.
Dr. Hana, everyone saying thank you for this presentation. It was really interesting, and I plan on Googling and listening to all of the articles or the links that are on the attachment. My question is just recently I've been looking a lot about utilizing AI for identifying cognitive decline. And so just wanted your thoughts if you guys have done any specific research at SC, and then just any recommendations or thoughts on the process or the idea.
Yeah, the idea of using AI tools to try to identify a cognitive decline. So I'm a part of a network that's actually trying to develop not specifically AI-based, but inclusive of AI-based tools to develop new ways of identifying cognitive impairment. That's particularly tied to things like pathology, things that we know are biological reasons for concern. So I don't have anything concretely now, but a number of us are working on this exact topic. And I have to say AI is far and away the number one question I get when it comes to fraud or cognitive impairment in the context of Alzheimer's disease. And I can tell you there's a lot of work right now that's happening. It's just, it's come about so fast. It's just, we're all just trying to catch up, if that makes sense. But yeah, I appreciate your question. And hopefully next time I have something more concrete to share.
Thank you. Lawrence, let's take your question next, if we can. Lawrence Presner? Did you want to ask your question if you're still on? Well, let me ask it if he's not on here. He had asked, within the broad realm of social cognition as a component of neurocognition, can you describe how this area can be assessed through neuropsychiatric testing?
Yeah, so social cognition, we believe, is a big part of what's going on. And so um, social cognition is something that there are a number of ways to look at this. It's interesting, the ways that we've tried to look at it, it hasn't really panned out. And that's not to say, I think it's more of an issue of the ways that we've tried to look at it than it is the point that social cognition is important. I think it's something that there aren't really great current neuropsychiatric tools to pick up on social cognition. Actually, arguably, we're one of the groups that are trying to do that. Actually, we're trying to actually develop that or develop things that could pick up on that. So again, this is one of those topics where I hope to have more concrete, beneficial, helpful things on this topic to share later. But we're actively wanting to find something that could be helpful for this.
We'll have you up next, but first I want to go to Casey Contreras. She had an early question that I think might be of interest to everybody in the group. Casey, are you still on? About your grad student? Is Casey there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, yes, I just wanted to know what that cognitive reappraisal would look like. Are there any specific interventions that you could suggest?
Yeah, no, actually, so it's so new that we don't really have anything concretely to offer you in terms of an actual intervention now. The point behind that study is to suggest that older adults who are able to more flexibly think about a situation in a different way are going to be less vulnerable. And so we're sort of using it as a way to say, okay, let's try and now think, what could we do to help older adults try to rethink a situation or think about a situation in a different way. It's almost like a cognitive flexibility test, or at least that's the way I think about it right now. But it's so new to us. We don't really have anything concrete, unfortunately. But I think for someone who's on the front lines, honestly, like I might think of like, is there a way that I can have the person I'm working with think about it in a different way, or at least suggest like a different way of thinking about a situation and seeing how they react to it? Does that make sense? Almost like use it as an exercise to try to get the older adult to think about something in a different way. I know this is I don't even know if you can do this, frankly. These are just us thinking about like, how can we apply this in a way that could be helpful to you all, for example, that are on the front lines. And we're still trying to think through it ourselves. So if you have any thoughts for us, I'd love to hear, actually. But yeah, those are just some very preliminary thoughts at this point.
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping we'll get to like 3 more of these. So first, let's have Bethany, if you can limit it to 1. You've been posting a lot on the question and answer, but if you can kind of be concise on there, and then we'll try to follow up with Joyce and Josephine.
Hi, yes. I'm 46 and I have a family history of Alzheimer's disease. And just for someone my age, what would be a good proactive approach to reducing risk and understanding my brain health and the lifestyle changes I could do, or evaluations to help prevent it so I don't become vulnerable at a later time in my life?
Yeah, great question. We do a lot of community talks on brain health, and I'll try to answer this in as short a way as possible. One of the other groups I'm a part of is something called the Global Council on Brain Health, and it's a group that's supported by AARP. If you go to globalcounciloonbrainhealth.org, actually, you'll see all of the materials that we've put together so far. What we've done is we've tried to look at all of the research and have distilled it into topic areas to focus on for brain health. So things like physical exercise is one of the most robust, beneficial things people can do for their brain health. Diet, social connection, cognitive engagement. So we have actual topic statements on each one of these that it's all free to download, actually. It's globalcounciloonbrainhealth.org. You can look it up, and everything is free, everything's downloadable, everything's accessible. There's even different languages, actually. And I give it to my patients even, actually, when they ask about brain health, like if they're curious about brain health or brain health topic, actually. It's a great resource, and hopefully that can help you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Would this, one more question. Would this help with someone who is like in their 60s and you see signs like from a parent that's experiencing some forgetfulness that would benefit them?
Yeah, I think those all of those suggestions on each one of the statements is applicable to anyone, even in early dementia phase, I would say. So, um, and really, the earlier someone would sort of pay attention to those things, the better. So, my mentor used to say the best time to think about your brain health is when you're a teenager,
No.
which doesn't apply to most of us, me for sure, but. There's no such thing as too late. There's always something that could be done that could
Thank
help.
you.
Yeah. Mhm.
So let's
And
try to
for
get
what
a
it's worth, I'll just share that, I have dementia runs in my family as well. And so I'm sympathetic and yeah, and I think we can all do something about it. So.
let's try to get a couple more in. Joyce, if you wanted to make your comment, and then Josephine, we'll probably end out with you.
This is Joyce. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So I have a client whose wife was suffering from Alzheimer's, and towards the end, he was being scammed with romance scams online, and he was sending tremendous amount of money. Family found out about it, and he didn't appear to have any type of cognitive impairment. And I didn't even think about this till I started talking to you. Even on the day that his wife died, he was sending money and making plans to go visit these people that were scamming him. So now I'm thinking that maybe his doctor should be, he should be maybe diagnosed or tested for depression. He's still doing this. It's been over a year. And perhaps it's the depression that's causing that cognitive decline that is causing him to send all this money. Is that what you might recommend?
So I actually think that I mean it could be depression if that's something that the older adult is dealing with. But I think in that situation, I think a lot of our research might be applicable actually. And again, this is not a lot of people know about this yet. We're trying to get the word out. So it could be that that person is experiencing brain changes consistent with a very, very early dementia process, and it's just manifesting in this way. But if depression is an issue, that's absolutely an issue that could be treated and addressed
Yeah,
as well.
because he's still running his business. It's just that
Yeah,
it's
sure.
very
And
frightening.
yeah, the cognitive tests can have shortcomings. With the blood test now for dementia, which should be available relatively soon, I think there's another potential avenue also. But yeah, it's very sad to hear. I'm sorry.
Thank you
that
very
you're going through
much.
that.
It was great
Yeah, and
presentation.
wish you the best.
Josephine, do you want to? I think this will be a great one to kind of end on, and then we'll let Esther finish up.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, in your research, have you found any correlation between trauma, say in younger life, and early onset dementia? And if so, could the brain scans help determine like preventive treatments in these cases?
Trauma is an interesting one. So it may contribute to dementia or it may not. And it depends on a lot of the intervening time, actually what happens, it looks like. So there's mixed research on the link between trauma and dementia outcomes. And then, to answer your second question, I think that's not to say that so it could actually. It's hard to not to say definitively without knowing the in between. And then your second question, I think there's brain imaging, there's blood tests, there's lots of ways to actually get worked up if there's a concern about dementia. And you know, again, if there's reason to do that, then I would do it. I wouldn't necessarily pursue that just because, but if there's a reason for concern, then that's the current recommendations now is that not to pursue it unless there's a concern, essentially.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And let me just add, I'm getting referred to or dealing with people with both developmental or intellectual disabilities, schizophrenia, other kinds of mental illness. And I think this is a whole other field of trying to intervene and support victims and their families that have either these kinds of disabilities. It's just a much tougher road. A quick example, I'm helping a young man with schizophrenia right now, and his sister who basically is helping to provide for him, but he's competent so far. And he's seeing, voluptuous models online, one of which is a girlfriend, and is getting him to open up a bank account, and we're dealing with all of that. And I referred him to something called Special Bridge, which is supposed to be a social connection program for people with disabilities. And he took a look at the people on there and he said, no, I prefer to go on Tinder and see my girlfriend, the voluptuous model. And so I think that's kind of what we're up against. And it's just a really tough population, and the families and people trying to help with those situations are there, but they really are much more alone than what I see with the older adult populations on this. So just a plug for, anyone doing work in that field, and maybe we can, devote one of our forums to that issue as well. So thank you guys very much. Next month, we've got Laura Sykes coming on. She's a very, very well-known banker. And she's going to be able to answer some of your questions about what some really great practices are in banking and probably what they can be doing better. So Esther, go ahead and close it out if you want.
I just want to remind everyone, if you're not already in the scam forum group, please email me admin@napsa-org. I'll paste it again on the chat. So yeah, and thank you so much, Duke. This was really amazing. Thank you all for your questions and your comments. And of course, Debbie and Steve, thank you so much. And Happy New Year, everyone. We'll see you next month.
And take a look at the Baker fraud report. It talks about a suicide. Steve discusses a case with a suicide. So if you aren't on that, please check in and look at that every Thursday. It really can inform a lot of the work you do, and at least keep your passion and your anger going against these criminals. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.